Seller financing is one of the best tools a buyer can use to buy an online business. It can, in the end, help you buy a business for less money and overall less sales price on the actual business itself. So let's dive into it on how you can use this tool to your massive advantage, because buyers who do this well typically are the ones that buy over and over again. What's up YouTube? Greg here with another video. Today we're discussing the incredibly exciting world of seller financing. So let's dive into it, and hopefully I can make this topic that comes off a bit dry into something a little bit more fun. If you need something to really inspire you to get into this video, just know if you're really good at doing this, you can become pretty wealthy. And hey, that's pretty exciting, right? I think. Leave a comment if it is. Okay, let's dive into it. So seller financing in general is a pretty easy concept to understand. If you're buying a business, say for $1 million, you say, here's $700K, Mrs. Seller, and they say, sure, pay me the other $300,000 over the next 6, 8, 12 months, whatever, right? That's seller financing in a nutshell. Now, within that kind of transaction, there is a bunch of different things going on with all kinds of potential deal structures, right? But seller financing can be a fantastic way to mitigate your capital risk. And in addition to that, it is pretty much the only financial tool that is routinely available to you as a buyer, because normal financial institutions just do not exist in this industry. It's just not a thing that happens. So because of that, this is really the only thing you got. There are other financing institutions out there that might give you money. Usually it's going to be something like a personal guarantee, which if you haven't seen my my video on how to buy a business for no money, definitely check that out. But basically you don't want a personal guarantee. Personal guarantee loan is going to mess you up with your actual house you live in, the car you drive, and all sorts of other things. So do not do that. Wouldn't recommend it. Does it work? Yes, it can. I still don't recommend it, but you could do it if you are super not risk adverse, I guess. You can do the personal guarantee, but I don't recommend it. Anyhow, going back into seller financing, this is one of the major tools, and we're going to dive deep in how to do it. And at the end of this video, I am going to share some of the why that using seller financing can give you a massive advantage when it comes to buying an online business. Let's dive in. All right, so how do we get this? How do we get this beautiful thing known as seller financing? Well, the first thing is to understand what kind of businesses would this be allowed on. And that is almost purely going to be based off of the actual sales price. So if you're looking at buying a business that's $20,000, $50,000, $70,000, most of what I'm talking about in this video just is not going to apply. In those kind of scenarios, really anything below $200,000 typically, you're not going to be able to succeed on an earnout, like maybe anything above 150, but typically you're going to be beaten out by an all cash offer. So it's usually not even really worth doing an earnout in that scenario, at least if you're using a marketplace like us, where we have a big buyer network competing for all sorts of deals. It could work in a private deal, though there is a chance you'd still lose the deal ultimately to someone just pays all cash. The reason why you lose that is because, if you didn't guess it, sellers do not want to do this. I mean, if you think about it, it makes sense, right? I built a business up. The last thing I want to do if I'm deciding to sell it is hope that you pay me back sometime in the future for it, right? I want all my money now up front, and there's not usually any benefit for me to allow you to do seller financing. It's very rare that sellers get any kind of benefit from it at all. And it's extra risk, because what happens if you don't pay me, right? Which does happen. It's rare on our marketplace. I've seen it a handful of times where it's happened over the years, but it definitely can. And this is a very big cause of concern and fear in an entrepreneur, right? It would probably be in you too. So you need to convince the seller to allow you to do an earnout. And one of the best ways you can do that is convince them you're really gonna pay them. Another thing that sellers might do, and this could be even something you use to convince the seller to give you seller financing, is some kind of added perk where you pay an interest rate on it, like a loan, or you pay a little bit extra on the multiple, so they get a little bit of a bump for taking the extra risk of allowing you to do seller financing. Most seller financing really will begin around the $500,000 level, and stay to the end of this video and I will go over the best industry tier, or not industry tier, the best pricing tier for online businesses when it does come to getting an earnout. Okay, now that we understand where we need to go to begin our search, not the low level, but kind of that mid level or above 7 figures, let's talk about what the next step is to get this. Remember, the seller does not want to do this. They want as much money upfront as possible typically. So you need to convince them that it's in their best interest to do it. So one of the best ways to do that is find out what do they want. Why are they selling the business? Most entrepreneurs are going to tell you, because I want the money. Duh, what kind of question is that? But there's usually a much deeper reason hiding beneath the surface of those waters that is a much more compelling and emotional reason. It's not just about them wanting money. Why do you want the money? Well, I want to go on this trip for the next 6 months, all this kind of stuff. I want to retire my wife, or I want to pay off the house, all these kind of things, right? So find out what the real reasons are. Ideally, the emotional reason, the desire of what they're doing, put on your copywriting hat and see how you can't make your deal fit perfectly into that where the seller financing makes total sense. So that is my first tip on that. And the other thing is to consider how you can help them maximize their sale, because that's what they want, right? They want to get the maximum amount of money for the deal. And this goes back to what I just said about offering them that extra perk, like, hey, look, if you let me finance this deal with you and say we hit these revenue milestones, I will pay you a bonus, and ultimately you're going to get more than if I paid you up front, right? All this kind of stuff can be very, very valuable to get the dialogue started in the right direction. Once this is all done and there is, a real opportunity here to make an offer with an earnout, or at least you feel like there is, that's when you need to start discussing terms. And terms are the most powerful part of this whole deal, because terms really decide everything. There are famous quotes of investors that say, like, I will loan you anything as long as you let me decide the terms, right? Yeah, I'll loan you $30 million where as long as the terms are where I pay you $1 a month, right? Stupid stuff like that. Terms are extremely powerful when used correctly. And this should really not just be a benefit for you, but the terms should also in some way benefit the seller. So again, that they want to agree to them. Now, real quick, before we start talking about terms more in depth, I want to talk about the idea of acquisition capital and working capital. The more you leverage, let's say you do a balloon style payment where you do an earnout where you're paying a small monthly fee and then you pay a huge chunk all at once to the seller. Now, if you do that in that kind of situation, you narrow your ability to succeed in your business if something bad happens. You're narrowing your margin of safety when really seller financing should be helping you with your margin of safety. So I always say, if you are looking to acquire a business using your acquisition capital, make sure you have 10%, maybe even 20% of the actual purchase price of that business in working capital. So if you see a business that's $1 million, even if you get seller financing at $700K, I would still have that $100,000 to $200,000 in working capital over here, because this is your oh shit money, right? That something bad happens, you have enough in your war chest to react in a good way to endure whatever storm that happens in the business and to make sure you pay that earnout to that seller, right? So I do still recommend having a good chunk of working capital if you use this. But let's get into terms, because again, terms are one of the most powerful things you can do, and you can really mitigate a lot of risk if you can agree with the seller on the terms of your desire. All right, let's talk about some really two very common things that are discussed in terms when you're acquiring a business using some kind of seller financing. And that is milestones and timeline. So milestones can be like the project succeeded on something. It could even be related to the timeline. And you can make it where your milestones are when you pay the earnout. So let's say you have a milestone of hitting $5,000 net profit per month. As long as you hit $5,000 net profit per month on the business, you pay that seller their earnout. Now, in this case, the seller is incentivized to make sure that business does hit it. So you got to keep them along a little bit, almost as like free consultation in that sense, to help you make sure the business hits that revenue number, because they want to get paid, right? Now, milestones don't need to be tied like that. They could also be tied to a project such as a web design refinish. Like maybe you see like this huge opportunity in the business where you want to do like 3-4 months of split testing, and the milestone is when that split testing is done, the earnout begins, right? Something like that. It could be done either way. In terms of profit, there's a subtle difference here between revenue and profit. When it comes to a milestone, you as a buyer usually are going to be much more rewarded for doing it profit, versus the seller will want you to do it with revenue. Now you might be wondering why that is, and the reason why is kind of hidden in what I just said. If you buy a business and let's say it is at $5,000 net profit to pay the milestone, anything above that, right? And if it's tied to revenue instead of profit, then the seller always gets paid as long as the revenue is above that certain agreed upon term, right? Now, if it's profit, you can just go spend money every single month on web design, more inventory, new experiments, new marketing experiments, all sorts of things to make sure you're always at $4,999 per month in profit, so you don't have to pay this seller over here ever, right? As the business keeps growing. This is a huge no-no. You're not only going to ruin your reputation, that seller's going to be wicked pissed at you if you keep doing this, but most sellers are not even going to let you do it anyways. Most sellers will make you tie it to revenue for this reason. But with that said, if you can convince the seller to let you do a profit, it is much, much safer for you, because say there is a shitstorm that happens, right? A Google algorithm update, a Amazon algorithm update, or anything like that. Well, you are protected. And that seller, if they agree to the net profit, if the reason why you're not paying is because of something like this happened, like they're not going to be happy, but they're also not going to hate you, right? They understand what's going on. So if you explain to the seller, like you're not looking to screw them out by doing what I just said about spending, and instead you are really just looking to safeguard your investment from the unforeseen, then when that happens, if the unforeseen does happen, the seller will understand, and they're not going to be angry at you. Like they're going to be sad, obviously they're going to be frustrated, but they understand at the end of the day. But that's the reason why sellers don't usually like it, because of that fear you're never going to pay them back. So that's milestones. It can be tied to revenue, it can be tied to net profit, it can be tied to a project, really anything your own creativity suggests. Like if you're buying a SaaS business and say there's a CTO that needs to come over and stay with the business with you for say 12, 14 months or something like that, maybe that is a milestone for that founder to really get paid out. This is something you see quite often in bigger businesses. So pretty much anything over $15, $20 million. This is more common than anything in the sub $10 million space, where there is like key employees that need to stay on with the business post sale for the people who acquired the business to keep doing their thing, to learn the ropes of the business, so to speak. And the entrepreneur gets paid out after that timeline or milestone is finished. And as you can see, milestone and timelines, they're both pretty well connected, but there is a difference. When you do a timeline with the terms, it can actually be much more set in stone than this variable of the milestone of whether it gets done or not. If the most vanilla kind of seller financing earnout that you can do is, okay, here's the money up front, I'll pay the rest back equally over 6 months, 12 months, 20 months, whatever, right? So timeline is a much more definite end than the milestone, which is more variable, right? Both can be used great. So in the sense of a timeline, obviously the longer timeline for you is the best, right? But the chances of you getting a 30-year earnout is very rare. Most earnouts in our space will be between 6 months and 18 months. I think the longest one I've seen is around 3 years. As a business gets bigger or more complex or with more opportunity, there is chances for that earnout to grow longer depending on the deal structure, right? And in the sense of an earnout growing longer, the seller actually might want that if the terms are in their favor, where they can ultimately get much more, potentially significantly more than if they had just sold it with the upfront amount in mind. So those are the two main things when thinking about seller financing, is milestones and timeline. And if you want a deeper dive onto different deal structures, I'll leave a link down below to a blog post I wrote on the subject that dives into these kind of concepts a bit deeper for you. So what are some of the ways you can make these terms benefit the seller? Because that's a theme throughout this whole thing. Because again, sellers don't want to do this, right? They want all the money up front. So you can do a lot of different things, and almost all of it's tied to basically the common theme of getting the seller more money for taking the earnout than if they didn't and just sold at full list price. So one way you can do that is interest payments on the loan, the earnout itself. You could offer quarterly bonuses to the seller if you guys hit like some stretch goal, right? Like it doesn't have to be tied to the initial milestone, but maybe it's something much higher than the actual ground floor milestone, right? You can even let the seller retain some sort of equity where they can see the upside in the business. This is a great strategy because it doesn't technically cost you any extra money typically. Now, you could argue it does, but in a lot of ways it doesn't by giving this upside to the seller, which is fantastic. I want to do this for a lot of businesses, but for businesses, say $700K, $1 million and up, it can be a real big attractive thing to a seller to give them a small amount of seller retained equity. It doesn't have to be huge, right? It could even be something like 5%, and they get some kind of upside for that passively for the remainder of the business's life. Sellers love that kind of stuff. So anything you can do where, one, the terms protect you, your capital risk, right? You want to make sure that if some problem happens in the business, your working capital doesn't disappear paying an earnout, right? Because you need that money to survive the storm. But at the same time, you want to make sure that the seller feels like they're protected, that they can be confident entering in this deal, this transaction with you, because they're confident they're going to get paid. All right, I told you I would tell you what is the best pricing tier to do an earnout to get the most amount of business for the least amount of capital. And it probably won't surprise you, but the best pricing tier is between $500,000 and $1 million, at least in the Amazon FBA space. We haven't looked at the data in the other business models, but my guess is that that's pretty much the same for all business models, because that's that awkward child stage where it's too big for most solopreneurs to buy and too small for a lot of private equity funded companies to buy. So it is the one that is the toughest to sell in a lot of ways because it's in that awkward zone. And if you want to see a breakdown of at least the Amazon FBA's stuff, that pricing tier, I'll leave a video link down below in the description and you can check out all the data we have on that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully it was entertaining and useful and not too dry, and gave you some tips on how to become wealthy. Talk to you soon. Bye.